Hi, this is Mike Fry with No Kill Learning, and I'm really happy to be here today with the next in my online webinar series, and probably the most important and easiest one of all. It really is getting to no-kill, an overview of what is the no-kill equation. And before we get into the presentation too horribly much, I just need to send a big shout out to our good friends at the No Kill Advocacy Center and No Kill Nation. If it weren't for them, I would have never learned about the no-kill equation. Nathan Winograd from the No Kill Advocacy Center wrote the book Redemption. He put the equation down in written form so that we can all follow it, and I'm just real excited to be able to present it to you today on the internet in this format. So here we go. It's worth noting that this really could be an hours-long webinar, but it's really not going to be. We're going to try to get it done in about 20 minutes because we're all busy people and you're watching this on the internet, so I'm going to go really fast. But you're going to see as we go through this that there's in some circles, no-kill is sometimes considered to be controversial. And I think the only reason that that is because whenever there's social change or a new social movement comes along, people are used to the old way of doing things. And so there's always controversy about change. And if you look at actually what's in the no-kill equation or how it works, I think what you're going to see is there's actually nothing really controversial about it. But there are, of course, naysayers out there, because there always is in any kind of social change movement. A little bit of definition in terms of what I mean by no-kill it doesn't mean no euthanasia. One of the most important things I believe the no-kill movement is doing is helping to reclaim the term euthanasia for its intended purpose. And that is, of course, to end the life of a terminally ill and suffering animal, or a seriously dangerous animal that cannot safely be put out into the public. Typically that amounts to, according to statistics, I would argue about 5% or sometimes maybe 3% of the total intake to animal shelters fall into that category. To allow some wiggle room for some special challenges in some certain communities where that number might be a little higher. The typical threshold is about 10%, they say. So a typical no-kill community will collectively save 90% of the total intake. Not of the adoptable animals or any of those other qualifiers that people will sometimes try to put on their outcome statistics, but 90% of total live intake. And I'd argue in most places that really should be more like 95%. And it ultimately, in its simplest way to say it, is that animal shelters that are no-kill or communities that are no-kill are saving every savable pet from open admission animal control shelters and all the other shelters in the community as well. A little bit about me is I am now with No Kill Learning, something that I've created this online resource for helping communities get to no-kill. Historically, I've been at Ark Animal Shelter for 14 years and have been the executive director there for about the last 10 years, where we maintained a live release rate of about 98%. I've also been known as the host of Animal Wise Radio for about the last 10 years. Which is how I've connected to many of the no-kill advocates around the United States that I've come to know and appreciate so much. A little history of no-kill. Prior to June 1st, 2001, there were literally 0 no-kill communities in the United States. There are currently more than 200. This slide is a little old. Currently there are more than 200. And they make up more than 400 no-kill cities around the United States, of course, because some of those communities are counties, and there's multiple cities in those counties, and so literally there are more than 400 no-kill cities in the United States currently. So it's a movement that's grown like wildfire, and really, as I mentioned earlier, it came about largely because of this book, Redemption, The Myth of Pet Overpopulation and the No-Kill Revolution in America by Nathan Winograd. And ironically, Nathan obviously knows what he's talking about because he was the director at the Tompkins County SPCA when that community became the very first no-kill community in the United States. And this book has been used as a roadmap for creating no-kill all over the United States ever since. And here's a sense of, they're all over the place. Some people like to say, oh, you can't do it in the South, but in fact there's several communities in the South, even in very rural South, and all over the United States. And this is really just a smattering handful of them. And it's interesting because they all have their own special stories. I'm going to tell a few of them during this presentation. One of my absolute favorite is that of Seagoville, Texas, and Sgt Carl Bailey, who was a veteran police officer in Seagoville, Texas. They decided at the city to move animal control from public health over into the public safety department, and then therefore it would become the responsibility of the police. And they told Sergeant Bailey, guess what? You're now going to be in charge of animal control. Of course, Sergeant Bailey is an animal lover and was an animal lover, so his first response was, no, I'm not doing that. I know what they do at animal control. I'm not taking that job. They said, oh, no, you really are. You're taking that job. And with some protest, he ended up taking the job, but he said flat out, I'm only doing it if we can be no-kill. And he openly says he had no idea really what that meant. He had just heard off in the distance that there were shelters that didn't kill animals. He hadn't read the book Redemption yet at that point. He didn't know anything about the no-kill equation, technically. He just said, we're not going to kill animals if I'm in charge. And the story continues, I guess. I don't know how exactly accurate this is, but I think it's pretty close. He says that, he walked in this first day on the job at 9 o'clock, and he told the staff, the killing stops now. At 9:02, they dismantled the gas chamber. And while they had previously been killing, upwards of 80% to 90% of the animals that came to that facility, he ended his first year with a 98% save rate. Here's some actual audio of Carl Bailey being interviewed on Animal Wise Radio, and this is what he has to say about it.
Well, our chief, Pat Stallings, decided that he wanted to bring animal services back under the police department. At the time it was under code enforcement. And I kind of cautioned him against that because of the problems we've had in the past with, it's a big public nightmare. They call in and complain about it. So I didn't know if he wanted to take that on, but anyway, he said, yeah, we're going to take it on and I want you to run it. I'm like, really? I don't have any experience running an animal shelter. He says, well, you're the dog lover. So that's how I ended up with it. I told him it had to be no kill because there was no way I could put down healthy animals and, just because we couldn't find them home. So we were going to have to do that. And they said, well, if you can do it, do it. And I said, well, prepare yourself because that's where we're going.
And so the first year after you took the job, what was your save rate?
97.5%, almost 98%.
So the no-kill equation, is this format that's been laid down by Nathan Winograd, but it turns out, I think, you will just naturally find your way to it if you decide, as a shelter, we're not going to kill animals anymore. It turns out you can just find your way to the program, even without reading the book. I would argue it's a lot easier if you read it and you know what the programs are and you do it in a thoughtful, methodical way. And so I'm going to introduce you to it. It's really pretty simple. It is a list, flat out, of, I would say, 10 programs and one additional factor that collectively come together to end the killing in animal shelters. And they are, in order, TrapNeuter Return or TrapNeuter Release for free-roaming cats. Don't have to kill them. You can neuter them and release them. Comprehensive adoption programs. probably one of the most important components of the no-kill equation, because, you've got to get the animals out of the shelter alive if they end up there, and adopting them to the public is the best way to do that. Low-cost, high-volume spay-neuter is important, very important. I would argue I don't think we even have to hardly talk about it today, because the animal shelters and the animal sheltering movement have been talking spay-neuter for years and years and years. If anything, they've maybe oversold spay-neuter a little bit. In some ways, there's been an overemphasis on spay-neuter, and at the expense of all the other programs, and you really need the whole equation for no-kill to work. Rescue groups are the fourth program, and of course, there's rescue groups or all around every animal shelter that are willing to come and take animals. Having an open, engaging relationship with the rescue community is critical for a shelter if they want to stop killing. Foster care, obviously there's pets and animals that aren't going to do well at the shelter. Neonatal kittens and puppies, animals with certain behavior problems that are too fearful to live in the shelter environment or whatever, can thrive in a foster environment. And there are foster homes all over the United States willing to step up and take care of those animals. Pet retention programs, where you actually proactively engage people who might otherwise be surrendering animals to the shelter, so you can help them keep their pets instead of surrendering. Really an important part of the no-kill equation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Rehabilitation. Well, of course, many animals that come to shelters have come from neglect or abuse, or have been hit by cars, roaming stray. They're injured. They have medical, veterinary, and behavior issues that the shelters need to address. And if the shelters refuse to address those issues, obviously needless killing is the end result of it. And I would argue that, the animal welfare movement expects, pet owners to be responsible and to provide that care. There's no excuse for the shelters not doing it. Engaging the public, wow, really critical. I mean, for years, animal shelters have been running around telling people they're irresponsible, the public's bad, the public is why we have to kill animals. And in fact, they need to turn that equation around and engage the public in constructive and, happy ways, so that the animal-loving public will come and adopt and volunteer and donate and do all of the things the shelter desperately needs them to do, so that they end up not killing animals. Volunteers are program number 9. Obviously, without a volunteer program, you're wasting resources doing things that volunteers can otherwise do for you for free. Volunteers will also become attached to animals at the shelter, and they become pretty much your free grassroots sort of marketing machine to help get animals adopted. Program number 10 is proactive redemption. Too often, animal shelters, especially animal control, will pick up a stray animal, they'll bring it to the shelter, and then they'll just sit back passively hoping the family comes to find it. But in fact, in many communities, especially the larger metro areas, there may be dozens of impound centers, and pets don't know our boundaries or city lines or county boundaries, and they move around. And so it's difficult for people to find their pets in many of those complicated and confusing systems. So a new kind of animal control is proactively looking for the families of lost pets, rather than sitting there passively waiting for the families to come find their pets. And they're seeing tremendous results in increasing the return to owner rates as a result. Really important programs, and they not only save the shelters money, but they also build great community support and community goodwill, because when the animal control actually says, wow, look, we found your pet and it's here, people love animal control that operates that way. So that's the 10 programs. The 11th factor, according to the No Kill Advocacy Center, is a compassionate director. I would argue it's the most important piece. If you don't have a compassionate director that's willing to ensure that the shelter they're leading will look at every animal that comes in the door and make sure each of the programs that that animal needs is in place so that it can leave the door alive, then none of it's going to work. That results in, shelters that will say things like, well, we have all these other things, we're doing them all already, but we're still killing animals. Well, it's because they're not doing they're not implementing and deploying those programs effectively for each animal. Somebody needs to say, look, this batch of neonatal kittens came in, they need a foster home. How do we engage our foster homes so we make sure those pets get into homes? Again, sitting back and passively saying we have foster homes, but they didn't come to the shelter to look for those kittens, so we had to kill them. The compassionate director is the one who needs to make sure that each of those programs are fully functional and killing is not an excuse. I argue, and what I like to say at No Kill Learning is that 11th factor is much more than the director. It's really an entire leadership structure, and that includes a heck of a lot more than compassion. Compassion is part of it, but it's not the whole picture. So I like to call that 11th factor effective leadership. And for more information about that, you can click on the leadership link at www.nokilllearning.com. So that's it. That's the no-kill equation in a nutshell. Nothing about it remotely controversial. That's what's required, and it's not that complicated. They're things I think most every shelter should be doing, regardless of how they want to label themselves. And so if they aggressively do all of those things, killing of healthy and treatable pets will not be necessary. So TrapNeuter Release, in detail, a little bit more detail. And again, for each of these programs, we've got a link at www.nokilllearning.com, and you can just click on the program to get more information. For TrapNeuter Release or TrapNeuter Return, we also have a full hour-long webinar about what it is, how it works, and why shelters should be participating in it. So go there, but in general, what it is referring to is the catching, sterilizing, so neutering, and then returning back to their home environment, free-roaming cats. It really got started primarily focusing on what were referred to as feral cats. It's been more and more used these days to help what we commonly are now referring to as community cats, because in cities and things, there are tame animals, tame cats who live around in alleys and in people's garages that are reasonably tame. They're not wild feral cats like most people tend to think of as feral, but they also don't live in a traditional home. They have shelter, they have people who feed them, but they're community cats, and so more and more TrapNeuter Release is also being used to help those cats. And of course, if you catch the cats and you sterilize them and you return them back to where they live, you're reducing the number of births and you're reducing the number of animals that are going to come into the shelter later on. And it also means that you've got a solution for these cats that come in that situation. And it also, of course, means that you've got an immediate solution for those cats that come in, that are healthy and robust and they have a place to live. A TrapNeuter Release or TrapNeuter Return immediately reduces the killing at a shelter today, and it reduces the intake of cats into the shelter in the future. So it's, you get a lot of bang for your buck doing TNR. And on the cost equation, it's really sort of ironic. Most shelters, especially animal control, I think the average national cost of taking in housing for the required hold period, euthanizing or killing, and then disposing of the body. I mean, the average cost of doing that for a cat is about $100. And I'm pretty sure most anywhere in the United States you can get a male cat neutered for around $25 if you're doing it in-house and you're paying a veterinarian hourly rates instead of paying commercial rates at a veterinary clinic. You literally can get a neuter for $25 if you do it that way, and a spay maybe $55. So TrapNeuter Return is not only more humane, it reduces killing, it also saves money. So it's just an absolute must-have program for animal shelters who want to operate efficiently and not kill animals. Comprehensive adoptions. Actually, the statistics prove that we can adopt our way out of killing. I mean, all of the other programs are important and have their purpose, but adoptions are like kind of where it's at. Research has proven every year about 21 million families are going to take in a new dog or cat every year. And collectively, if you look at all of the animals that enter animal shelters every year, only about 8 million do. And so there are plenty of homes to come and get animals out of shelters. Now, of course, there's a small percentage of that 21 million that are going to acquire a pet, that are committed to getting from a breeder. But even if you subtract them off, you're still left with about 17 million families that are open to getting a pet from a shelter, and there's only about 8 million animals in shelters. And not all of those animals even need rescue. As I said, some can be, trapped, neutered, and released. There's a tiny percent that really are terminal and need to be euthanized. So if you look at the number of animals that really need rescue from shelters versus the available homes, there's the equation is really actually really good. Some people have talked about so-called pet overpopulation, but in fact the dynamic is the reverse. What shelters have had is a marketing problem or an advertising problem. They've not effectively connected with their community so that they can get those adoptions turbocharged and moving. And really, that's what a comprehensive adoption program is gonna do. Advertising, off-site adoption, friendly adoption environments for people at the shelter, all really important parts of a comprehensive adoption program. And in fact, I would argue adoptions are more important almost than anything, because if you think about it, if you push people away, if the shelters or rescue groups push people away, as they oftentimes do, with all kinds of restrictions, all kinds of criteria, they make it unfriendly, then people end up getting their pets from pet stores, which are really puppy mill animals oftentimes, or they're buying from other commercial sources, and those animals aren't spayed or neutered. So if you adopt an animal, you're also doing a spay-neuter, because hopefully every pet coming out of a shelter into a home is already spayed and neutered. So you're increasing the number of sterilized pets in the community through an adoption program. So really, you save a life, you can then bring in another pet into the shelter, and you've got a pet spayed and neutered all at the same time, and you've generated some revenue for the shelter through an adoption fee. You've also built a relationship with a family that now thinks of you as a resource for helping them with their pets. So adoptions, absolutely fantastic, absolutely wonderful. And this graphic just really kind of shows you how there's all these different inputs. But if you change the equation just a little bit, if you increase the adoptions, you reduce the numbers of animals coming from pet stores and puppy mills and things, and you end up with a larger percent of the population of animals in your community as sterilized. And so, it's just a win-win-win all the way around. Really can't say enough good things about adoptions. Of course, low-cost spay-neuter programs. The no-kill movement generally is a big fan of, low-cost spay-neuter programs. We're not fans of mandatory spay-neuter. People have often thought of killing in shelters as a problem of pet overpopulation, but I would argue it's really shelter overpopulation. So if a shelter takes in more animals than are leaving alive, killing ends up being the result. Mandatory spay-neuter programs really just create another reason for animal control to impound more animals, and it creates more obstacles for people to get them out alive. So mandatory spay-neuter programs can actually increase killing at animal shelters. But making spay-neuter easy and cost-effective for people is a great way to stimulate sterilization and reduce the number of animals that are born and reduce the number of animals that are coming into your shelters. So low-cost spay-neuter, yay, yes. Mandatory spay-neuter, absolutely not. Rescue groups, it's common sense that, with rescue groups, you can dramatically increase your live outcomes. If you don't have the resources or the housing capacity, every community in the United States has got a bunch of nonprofit rescue groups ready to step up and fill the gaps. And I would argue, because rescue groups very often have networks of foster homes that they're working with, they're oftentimes more capable of handling the special needs animals that have behavior issues or need extra special care, like neonatal kittens and things. So they can be really invaluable resources for animal shelters. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, there's been, I think, a tendency for many animal shelters to put barriers or walls up between themselves and the rescue groups, as if there's some sort of competition between them and the rescue community. In fact, the shelters need to be the ones who engage their rescues. And if they do, what I've seen all over the United States is the rescue community will absolutely step up and support the shelters. But the shelters really have to initiate and get that going. Foster homes, yes, you can utilize the foster homes of the rescue groups, but it's also great to start your own foster networks, so that you can have your own resources to put those special needs animals into those homes. There's absolutely no downside to foster homes. They, expand the network that you have, marketing and helping you. And I would just say this, they're also free. They're providing free services, and they expand the walls of your facility out into the community. There's some common sense rules, do's and don'ts, for making your foster program work and really embracing your foster homes. And you can find those at www.nokilllearning.com, and then just click on foster homes. Really important, and again, they provide free resources and housing. You just need to do it. Pet retention programs, wow, this is one of my absolute favorite things. Many of the people who bring animals to shelters are dealing with a problem within their family. It's not necessarily a pet problem, and it's oftentimes a problem the shelter can help fix. Or if it's something like inappropriate urination with cats, or somebody in the family is allergic to pets, or whatever the reason is, there's usually very simple, easy solution to that. No-Kill Learning is actually launching a online and telephone help desk that shelters can use and take advantage of. Because I would argue this can be some of the most complex work that shelters do. The sad thing is that when people come to a shelter, they expect and think the shelter's really just going to check off a couple of boxes on a form, and then you're going to take their pet. And what this requires is actually some sort of heartfelt intervention where you really dig into finding out what is going on with the pet and the people, so that you find out why they're really bringing it to the shelter. Oftentimes, the first time you ask them, they're not going to tell you the truth. And the reasons for that are complicated, and actually in a full webinar about pet retention programs that is on the No-Kill Learning website at www.nokilllearning.com. Click on pet retention. You can watch that full webinar. But again, it's complicated. Training staff to be able to have those complicated conversations, to really dig into what's going on in this family, why are they really getting rid of the pet, it's complicated stuff. And so we're providing a resource for shelters who want to learn how to do that, train their staff how to do it, or if they want, they can literally just, refer the people over to us and we can handle that for you. Really an important program, and I would argue might be one of my favorite programs because actually when families get rid of their pets, I believe there's damage done to children in those homes. All the research says that children who grow up with positive experiences with pets are smarter, they're more empathetic, they grow up to be, better adjusted adults, they have healthier relationships. So what does it say about the family if the family is getting rid of a pet that is the best friend of a child? What's the damage that's done there? I think it's a lot. And so we can actually help animals, help people become better pet stewards, and help keep those family units intact. And one last thing about pet retention programs that I just think are so important and why. Our job, I believe, as animal shelters is to teach responsible pet stewardship. And we say things like, pets are like family. But then we treat them as kind of disposable, so because when someone comes to surrender it at the shelter, we treat it like it's a blasé, unimportant kind of event. Well, if pets are family, animal shelters should act like it, and that means if somebody's coming to get rid of a family member, we need to treat that as a very serious situation. It needs a significant and meaningful response from the shelter. And a good pet retention program can help you do that. About 60% of the people who are surrendering pets to your shelter are reachable through a pet retention program. Rehabilitation, that's both behavior and medical rehabilitation. I'm sorry, but shelters are scary places for animals, and all too often we will simply scare those poor dogs more by putting them through a brutal temperament test. And then if they don't perform exactly perfectly, we put them down. But in fact, we can provide all kinds of, therapeutic experiences, enrichment in the shelter, actual training for dogs. We can, do the same thing for cats. And we can have a veterinary program that ensures that we will treat all treatable ailments that pets have. We expect the families who adopt from us to do it. It would be kind of hypocritical if the shelters themselves weren't doing it as well. Program number 8, engaging the public. Well, of course, you've got to be able to engage the public because you can't do anything without them. I mean, they're gonna support you with finances. They're gonna volunteer. They're going to adopt, foster. You need them all to do that. And unfortunately, so many shelters for so long have been doing the opposite. They spend their time scolding the public or punishing the public or, pushing the public away by not having friendly atmosphere at the shelter or by having all kinds of restrictions. And, that just doesn't work. You've got to find a way of engaging the public through creative marketing, through attractive imagery, through proper messaging. And if you do that, you will see a tremendous response, and you'll discover that your community is absolutely filled with animal lovers who will support you no matter where in the United States that you are. As I said earlier, volunteers, my gosh, you can use them in practically every area of your shelter. Whether it's walking and socializing dogs, you can use them for feeding, transporting. There are shelters who are using them, volunteer veterinary technicians, volunteer veterinarians to perform medical work. You can literally utilize resources in every inch of your operation, and not doing so, of course, is wasting money and failing to engage people who are absolutely willing to be there to help you. Proactive redemption, really probably the best at this that I know is Mitch Schneider, who used to be with Washoe Regional Animal Services in Reno, Nevada. On our website at www.nokilllearning.com, there's a full webinar done by Mitch Schneider about how he, I think, achieved the highest return to owner rates in the nation at Washoe Regional Animal Services. And it's, really simple stuff. I mean, when animal control finds a dog running loose, they pick it up. How hard is it to simply knock on the doors in that neighborhood, and ask people who are home, do you know this dog? Do you recognize this dog? Do you know where it lives? There's a whole set of very simple things an animal control officer can do in the field to get that animal home without the animal ever even coming in. And of course, if it has to come in, then there's things you can do at the shelter to go actively look for the families of lost animals. Absolutely critical. You can increase income to your shelter because if you return an animal to their home, they pay the roaming at large fees, and they pay the impound fees. So you get an animal out, you keep them in the shelter less time, and you generate revenue. A great program. So check it out. Check the full webinar out again at www.nokilllearning.com and click on Redemption. And then, of course, there is the Compassionate Director that we talked about. I love this quote, actually, from Valerie Hayes. She was a volunteer at Tompkins County when that shelter transitioned from being a traditional shelter to being no-kill. And she tells the story of some foster kittens that she raised. It was typical kind of shelter where they had a foster program. It wasn't particularly utilized very effectively because there's Valerie. She raised this litter of foster kittens. And then when it was time for them to come back to the shelter, it was a killing shelter, and she was worried about what was going to happen to her kittens. And so she wrote on the forms and told the staff, if you run into any problems or space is an issue or anything else comes up, I will come back and get these kittens. And she wrote that information on each of their intake forms, and she insisted she didn't want her kittens killed. And of course she found out later that her kittens were killed because what they were lacking at that facility was effective leadership or a compassionate director. And she wrote in this piece that she wrote titled I Was There about the transition to no-kill, she writes, quote, "The first and only genuine apology I ever got from someone in authority came from someone who had been on the other side of the continent when my kittens were taken from their cage and injected with sodium pentobarbital. From someone who likely never even heard of Tompkins County, New York at the time, and who would not have allowed something like that to happen," end quote. And what she's referring to is when the new director, Nathan Winograd, was hired, he had a meeting with Valerie, and the very first thing he did was apologize that the facility killed her kittens. Think about that. The new director comes in and embraces the volunteers, is compassionate with everybody in the facility, and that's what this agency needs, a compassionate director and effective leadership above the director at the board level that will support the compassionate director to do the things that they need to get done. That's really what it's all about. And collectively, you put all of those things together, 10 programs along with effective leadership, and no-kill is the result. It's really that simple. Again, 10 programs and one factor is the no-kill equation. And not controversial, not one piece of it is controversial. The only reason people have been distressed about it is it's social change. It requires people to rethink the old excuses and let go of the old excuses. And if they do, no-kill is the result. And no-kill is actually cost-effective because if you think about it, holding and killing animals costs money. It's the old-style animal shelter, which is based on catching and killing, is 100% revenue negative. Releasing to rescues costs nothing. Releasing to TNR groups costs nothing, or doing TNR costs less. Adoptions generate revenue. And so the entire thing actually helps generate money or costs less money. Even, proactive redemption saves money and generates revenue, all at the same time. Some people might think that, in disaster or rapid response scenarios like hurricanes or animal hoarding cases where you have this dramatic influx of animals all at once, that maybe there's an opportunity or a need at that point to start triaging and euthanizing, but I find that's not the case at all. In fact, those dramatic events are the perfect opportunity to dramatically reach out to your community and get extra support. And I've seen multiple cases of that, including in animal hoarding cases. Hurricane Katrina, there was dramatic life-saving that took place as a result of that. And it was very interesting to watch the difference between the no-kill responders in Hurricane Katrina versus the killing responders, because there were both. It was all going on. But I think that the no-kill folks really got it down and did an amazing bunch of work during Hurricane Katrina, and I think saved a heck of a lot more animals as a result. So anyway, there you go. That's the no-kill equation and a quick overview and some of the cities. I think it's maybe time for you to start thinking about adding your community to the map, and if you would like help in figuring out how to do that, I am available at www.nokilllearning.com. Thanks for watching.